American wins a Nobel Prize.
American Arthur Ashkin sharing the Nobel Prize in Physics with scientists from France and Canada for advances in laser physics. Ashkin, who developed optical tweezers, which are basically light beams which can grab tiny particles such as viruses without damaging them, is awarded half of the roughly $1 million prize, while France's Gerard Moreau and Canada's Donna Strickland will split the other half for helping develop short and intense laser pulses that have broad industrial and medical applications. She is only the third woman ever to win the physics prize. The Nobel Peace Prize gets awarded Friday. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hey, have you called in to share your testimony about how God has been a blessing in your life? If not, what are you waiting for? Share-a-thon is almost here. Stop whatever it is that you're doing and call 877-327-5647. God is too good for us to just sit there and not tell others about his goodness and his mercy. Simply call 877-327-5647. We can't wait to hear from you.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I cannot specifically say that he was one of the ones who assaulted me, but before this happened to me at that party, I saw Brett Kavanaugh there.
If Avenatti's got corroborating witnesses, where are they? It's been a week, and he hasn't put a single one forward. Not a one.
And he didn't know when he was called that his client had had a restraining order on her.
Yeah.
He didn't even know that.
All he said was, it's all bogus, which that's not going to cut it.
People tend to forget this. Everybody knew Trump was going to lose. Well, I'm here to say I think the odds are even money. Election night 2018 will be an even worse shock for the left than 2016 was. I don't think people want open borders. I don't think people want tolerance for fentanyl and opiate deaths. I don't think people want giant tax increases. I don't think people want to see mobs out there running around intimidating and bullying people. And I think that the Democrats are in a very, very weak position going into the last 5 weeks.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome from the Heartland. It's Stacy Washington. I'm host of Stacy on the Right. I'm also the 2018 Journalist of the Year from the Second Amendment Foundation. It's saf.org if you want to go there and watch some of the speeches and panels from the conference. And still riding high off of that. Also still riding high off of the fact that we're doing a daily confession now. So let me tell you what's on the show. First of all, we have Vic Ath. He's a former development officer for the Young America's Foundation. He's going to come on today and talk about America's forgotten immigrants, the victims of socialism. Super important subject for us to keep at the forefront of our minds, because people are currently in the process of being convinced that there's a system better than ours, and it's socialism. And they keep pointing to countries that seem to be doing fine on the surface, but all of their military expenditures are paid for by the United States because we're capitalists and we have lots of extra money on hand, even though we borrow so much. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how difficult it is for them to really sell this, and how it should be difficult. In fact, it should be impossible, because any American who's experiencing the prosperity that we have had for the entirety of the existence of this country, even when we've had severe deprivation like the Great Depression, we've always been able to bounce back because our system enables people to, by the sweat of their own brow and their own creative ingenuity, create circumstances that cannot be replicated anywhere else in the planet. So we're going to talk about that. We also have some information about fiscal year 2018. Our debt is up over $1 trillion, and we borrowed over $8,172 for every American who had a job. It's crazy pants. Imagine somebody sending you a bill for that much out of the blue and saying that's your part of the national debt, and then just saying we're going to take it out of your 401k, or we're going to start garnishing you. Woo, people would be upset. That's a way to get them to shrink the government down. Start making people pay for the debt that we owe now. Pay it down now. Oh yeah. So we'll talk about that as well. I want to get into the Daily Confession. So if you're just tuning in, welcome to the show. We're doing the Daily Confession at the top of every show because, first of all, and I did this yesterday before I'd even seen the email about a listener saying that all day long she'd heard, kind of that Judge Kavanaugh's life had been destroyed. And I'd already been on that same vein. And when I said his life had been destroyed, I'm talking about the life that he knew before he went out for this appointment, and kind of the attitude of that life, because he'd really been, he hadn't been attacked like this ever. He'd never had this kind of assault on his personal life, his work life, his family life, his home life, and the lives of people near and dear to him, his friends. That's why he wept, because his friends had been attacked and assailed, and really they'd had their reputations assaulted as well. And so I do not believe that Judge Kavanaugh's out for the count. In fact, I believe just the opposite. It's in times like these that we draw closer to the Lord, and he is able to show himself strong in us. In our weakness, we are made strong in him. It's true. It's absolutely true. If you don't believe it, just wait until times get tough for you and watch the Lord come through. He's our refuge. He's our high tower, our strong tower. We run to his wings and are made safe. We actually have a high protector who is able to do greater and above, far above and beyond all that we dare ask or think, according to the power that works in us, which is the Holy Spirit. And so I want to make sure that through all of the news that we cover on a day-to-day basis, and I don't believe it's Debbie Downerism at all, but I do think that it can become overwhelming. And I was sharing this a bit ago on another program, and we were talking about just this idea that you've got, you know, if you look at the news media, the only story going in America right now is Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. But we all know there are plenty of people in America who are dealing with sickness in their bodies, their spouses' bodies, their children's bodies. They're experiencing work loss. People are being let go. Their companies are still kind of correcting and reorganizing across the country. And these are not stories that make the news. When you wake up to an email that says, come collect your things, or we need to meet with you in HR, and you find out they're letting you go and they're just giving you the bare minimum, not the old severance package you used to have, but the new one that they instituted about 12 months ago that now includes you. And so your wonderful separation has now just turned into 30 days or 90 days worth of pay and goodbye. It doesn't mean you can't find another job, but it means that you're struggling, and the last thing you care about is whether or not the Senate wants to discuss Judge Kavanaugh throwing beer when he was a college student. I thought, according to the left, that anything goes. I thought, my body, my choice. I thought, stop putting your morality on me. Stop judging me. I thought the left believed in the kind of wild carousing that we saw from Judge Kavanaugh. That's what I thought. I thought it was boys will be boys and they're going to have fun. And, so obviously not for sexual assault, not now, but back when Bill Clinton was doing it, that's between him and his wife. Those settlements don't mean anything. They don't have anything to do with his ability to run the country. So, I mean, which is it? And also, I'm not a beer drinker, but I definitely have been in enough restaurants and eaten out enough to see people drinking beer to know that you don't put ice in beer. Why are all of these stories plagued by this absolutely, there's always an element to the story that's unbelievable. How can he throw a beer on somebody with ice in it? So is it really beer, or was that a thing back in the 70s for people to drink beer with ice in it? Somebody have to let me know. I've never in my life seen a person drink a beer at a restaurant with ice in it. Another lie. And I thought if it happened before he was 18, it didn't matter. I thought people, have to be tolerant of other people's differences. If he was a brawler back in college, so what? And that's not the way I feel. But that is what the Democrats have told us. Isn't that the case? We went to see that movie this weekend, the one with Kevin Hart, where he's going back to night school. I think that's the name of the movie, Night School. It was just a load of vulgarities. There were some genuinely funny moments, but they took a movie that could have been so funny and so cute, and anything goes. One of the characters had to be a lesbian and stayed it multiple times during the movie. And again, it's up to us to decide what we're going to go watch and spend our money on. But I thought, according to the left, we're not allowed to put our moral judgments on other people. Yet with Judge Kavanaugh, that's all I hear them doing, because they can't do the sexual assault thing is out the window. I hope y'all know that. That ship has sailed. The idea that he was running, all of the horrible, those were some of the worst lies and slander we've seen publicly leveled against someone recently, all of that's out the window. The second accuser is being discredited. The third accuser, a lot of Democrats are like, well, I don't even believe that. And the further into it they go, the worse it gets. But here we are, knowing that we know we're going to be attacked. We know that there's going to be rough stuff going on, especially politically, now that we are at this place in the country where we literally have a split right down the middle, and we have evil on one side just running amok and advocating for every improper act. And then you have people on the right side who, honestly, it's just regular people. It's not that it's virtuous over on the right, but at least there's an acknowledgement that we need God. We need to have him in the mix. And that's not from everyone on the right, but it's definitely a more prevailing thought. So what are we to do? Well, we got to go to the word. So today's daily confession is Romans 16:20. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus be with you. So what that sounds like is, Father, thank you that you are the God of peace and you will soon crush Satan under my feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus is with me. And you're confessing that. And when you start feeling that anxious spirit creeping in on you, when you start worrying about what's going to happen this week, when you start thinking this looks hopeless, what's happening with America, it looks like it's on fire, you confess this and allow God's peace to rush in and know that he's still on the throne. He still turns the head of the leader whither which way it might go, and that he works all things out for the good of those who are called, that love him and are called according to his purpose. And he can make a way out of no way, and that he is hearing your prayers. He hears the prayers of the saints. They're continually poured out before him. And it's our job is to send those puppies his way. It's our job to communicate with him and to not allow this. It's just like a spirit of division and upset that is just roiling the country right now. When you're looking at someone in the grocery store, are you honestly thinking about Judge Kavanaugh and the accusers? Or are you thinking, do I recognize that person? I wonder how much longer I'm going to be in here because I got to get home in time to, walk the dog. Or did I get everything on the list? Or for me, earlier today at the grocery store, I couldn't find any frozen corn dogs. My son put frozen corn dogs on the list and I couldn't find any. I hadn't thought about Judge Kavanaugh or the Supreme Court or the Democrats for at least a couple of hours. And I probably wouldn't have, except, I'd already prepared for the show today and I knew I was doing a show. And so, my mind turned back to it. But we have got to start fighting this tendency to feel low down and beaten and downtrodden, and to assume the language of victimhood and of the left when God has told us he puts it's all of the Satan and his minions are under our feet. He doesn't say he's just that he's just under there. God says he will soon crush Satan under our feet. And that is a continuing theme in the Bible. Just so we know, I didn't just cherry pick one. Armed for battle. Psalms 18:39 says, you are armed with strength for battle. You humbled my adversaries before me. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And the blood of the Lamb will protect you. In Revelation 12:11, it says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. It's time to claim the inheritance that comes along with being clothed in white, child of the King, royal priesthood. We are the truth bearers. It's time for us to act like it. Lift your head and understand that the author and finisher of our faith has seen even this circumstance and planned for it and ordained all of us for such a time as this to speak the truth in love and to go forward, not in fear, but in strength and power. He hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but he's given us a spirit of peace, love, and a sound mind. So these are things that if we're feeling that, we meditate on them, and then we go forward. We're not going down fighting. We are fighting, but we're not going down. And I truly believe that it's the silent anger. The same thing we saw when the media gave Donald Trump millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars of free airtime because they thought, this is the guy we want to put up against Hillary. She will destroy him. And instead, they empowered an individual who I really believe he was on his way to winning beyond that. I couldn't see it at the time, but he was on his way to winning without their free advertising. But they just put him over the top. And now he's that monster of their own creation. And soon we'll have yet another, Judge Kavanaugh, who was a moderate, a politically moderate individual. Sure, he was a Republican, but very much in the vein of our more moderate Republicans in the conference. And now they've pushed him over into our world. He may not be Bible thumping yet. He may not be cleaning his guns obsessively yet. He may not yet be reading the Constitution obsessively or having his kids take Hillsdale colleges online, or Hillsdale classes. But, he's close. You could hear it in his voice. That's a man who's been forever changed by the attacks that the left launched on him, and thank God for it. When we get back, we're going to have more for you. Stay right there.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call *345 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call *345. Message and data rates may apply. That's *345.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Back in the late 1960s, there was an attempt to overthrow the leadership of a large Christian organization. This was led by a handful of strong, appealing leaders. They marched into the president's office, sat down, and began to outline their vision, their direction, and what was wrong with his leadership and the organization. And the bottom line is they asked him to resign. They said they knew better than he did what the organization needed. Well, not only did he refuse to resign, but by the end of that meeting, they were all fired. Well, today, this organization has not only grown, it has thrived and become incredibly fruitful for the cause of Christ. We shouldn't be nervous, suspicious Christians thinking that everybody is out to get us. That is not the purpose of that story. On the other hand, we should never underestimate the spirit of pride and or jealousy. In Nehemiah chapter 4, we see an incredible conspiracy, a plan to stop Nehemiah in his tracks. Listen to these words, beginning in verse 8. And all of them conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause a disturbance in it. Now verse 9. But we prayed to our God, and because of them, we set up a guard against them day and night. And now down in verse 21. So we carried on the work with half of them holding spears from dawn until the stars appeared. And verse 23. So neither I, my brothers, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me, none of us removed our clothes. Each took his weapon, even to the water. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Not everybody has pure motives, nor do they want to be a source of encouragement to you. Keep your eyes on the Lord, but take necessary precautions.
Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz is produced by Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
All right, welcome back to the show. After our interview, we're going to delve into the story of the young man that I previewed for you yesterday, the one who he was wrongly convicted of, but on the word of someone else, just like what's happening to Judge Kavanaugh, where he's being accused based on no evidence at all. And this young man served 5 years in prison and lost his football scholarship and really had his life derailed by this false accusation that was later recanted by his accuser. And so we're going to talk about that in the third segment. We'll also take your calls. The number is 866-963-2037. As we do in the last segment every day, we'll take your calls. And right now it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest. It's Vic Ath. He's a former development officer for Young America's Foundation. Thank you so much, Vic, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on, Stacey. Happy to be here.
I'm really glad to talk to you about this. Here's your piece over at National Review, America's Forgotten Immigrants, the Victims of Socialism. So let's talk about the failed ideological rival to freedom making a comeback here in America. Why is that happening?
Well, Stacey, I wrote this article in part because of just the heightened rhetoric from the left on immigration in our country. And what they fail to realize and fail to bring up is, the America's Forgotten Immigrants, the victims of socialism. There are countless Americans that have come to this country legally, that have gone through the process. Countries like parents who came from Cambodia, and they have undergone atrocities in these other nations only to come to the United States and have their voices and their stories ignored by the left.
And so I kind of have an idea of why the left would not want to highlight stories from people who've immigrated here from failed experiments like Cambodia or, let's say, Venezuela, a more recent example of how socialism just does not work. But how can we get those stories out? I mean, you're sharing here on this program. How do we get these stories out so that high schoolers and college students can understand that it only works, socialism only works when you have someone else like America paying for your military. And even then, it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, well, I think the problem comes down to, and this is the root of the problem, is our education system. Young Americans, kids in high school, even in middle school, even in college, they're not hearing these stories. They're not talking about this in the history textbooks. Socialism is viewed as this untried, this new idea that hasn't been tried before, something radical. And, you're not going to hear about Cambodia in your textbooks. You're not going to hear about Venezuela in your textbooks. And the professors and the teachers aren't going to talk about the failures of socialism. They're going to talk about the so-called failures of capitalism and the unjustness of capitalism. I think it goes back to our education system. And in order to get stories like mine out there, stories like that of my parents, I feel like we need to take a look at our education system before we even have that conversation.
So we're talking about a textbook issue, but we know who controls textbooks for public education anyway. And so much of private school, so if you're talking about independent private schools that don't have a component of religion, whether it's Catholicism or Christianity, most of these private independent schools also use similar textbooks to the ones that are used in public school. They're just at a higher level, a higher reading level. And they all promote this idea that if we could only try socialism the correct way, then 100 million people wouldn't die. People wouldn't starve to death. The leadership wouldn't kill people, shoot them in public places, prevent them from protesting and exercising their rights. We just need to take the guns from everyone and then try some socialism.
Yes, and that notion and that argument has just been brought up endlessly. And even the argument of, what they have in Europe, that's the type of socialism that they want to try, not the socialism of the Soviet Union or China or Venezuela. That's more different than the socialism that is in Europe. But, in my case, in my family's case with Cambodia, I could not think of a more pure form of socialism that was implemented. Pol Pot, who was the dictator in Cambodia, he was educated in France. He had his education in France. He learned about socialist philosophy. He brought that back with him to Cambodia, and he implemented it perfectly. Like private property rights, for example, there was no private property. The government controlled all property in Cambodia. No citizens were allowed to own things. They was provided to them from the government, health care included, and it was a disaster. I mean, even the Vietnamese, who were communists at the time, had to invade the country of Cambodia because Pol Pot was murdering his own people. He was too socialist. He was too socialist by the Vietnamese standards because he nailed it perfectly.
I'm still reeling. I'm sorry. I'm still reeling from the fact that you just said that he just learned about it. It's almost like he learned about it offhand and took it back there and then was able to kill all those people. Like, that's how dangerous misinformation is. I'm of the mindset that for parents, and this is speaking as someone, our kids used to go to public school and then we put them in a private Christian school. We have 1 year of homeschooling under our belt from our senior doing that last year before she graduated and went on to college this fall. But I'm of the mindset that most parents, especially if you're a parent of faith, if you love this country, that you should really be looking into homeschooling, or that you should be so active in your kid's school that it's like it's your school. If you're, if you have a family member at home that's staying home and can actually devote those hours, it is imperative that our kids know that this is the wrong way to go. And the left has been so organized in their takeover of public school that it's almost as if you can't shoehorn the truth in there.
Yes, that's correct. And I mean, I think that's where we conservatives, where we need to improve. It's, again, looking at our education system, looking at who's on the school boards, looking at the curriculums. That the left, for years, they have dominated the field. And if we're thinking about the future, if we're thinking 100 years ahead, we need to get conservative in academics, and either at the collegiate level or at our high schools, our middle schools, our elementary schools. We need to start teaching civics again in this country, and our young people need to understand what makes America exceptional. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and your family's story. Oh my goodness, your father learned English from Christian missionaries, and a church sponsored he and your whole family, to come to the United States, and then he worked hard. He had no education before, finished high school, earned a bachelor's degree in mathematics and physics, which that's no easy curriculum, and then earned a master's and PhD in mathematics as well, and then worked with NASA on the Space Shuttle Endeavour, and to this day is a contracted civilian advisor to the Department of Defense. This is the kind of stuff where your dad should be traveling the nation, visiting high schools, talking about the fantastic opportunities that exist here in the United States for any student who wants to work at NASA, who wants to take up real studies, math, science, and really focus on those and do well in those areas to go on to do amazing things. And it's not just NASA. We have fantastic companies here, Exxon and other companies that if you want a scientific job, Boeing, these are places where if you know math and science, you not only have a spot waiting for you, but you're well paid, and they continue to help you get more education to work in your career field. I mean, America has so much opportunity for kids who want to work, and then you don't have to worry about needing the government to own health care or anything like that, because you're well educated and you have an opportunity to make a life for yourself. But America is also exceptional because you don't have to have a college education to be successful in America. You can work and earn a living and take care of a family in America without a college degree. You said, Ronald Reagan said it best: if freedom is lost here, there's no place to escape to.
Yes, and I firmly believe that. My father and my mother, they both raised me to be a proud American, and they immigrated to the country in the 80s, in the early 80s, when Ronald Reagan was president, and they saw at that time just the hope and the vision that Reagan portrayed as America's president. And my father saw that optimism and saw that spark and saw his opportunity. Yeah, when he came to the United States, he was living in a poor neighborhood. Again, he did not speak English. He didn't have the resources. He didn't come up from a position of privilege, per se. But he saw this as an opportunity to make it. And at that time in the early 80s, to be an American meant you won the lottery. My dad won the lottery when he came to the U.S., and he took full advantage of the opportunities afforded him. And I believe that in this country, we've had so many innovations, so much progress here in America. American scientists, American businessmen who have led the world in academia and sciences. I still believe America's the place to do it. The American dream is still alive and well. But again, if we don't look at our education system, if we forget what made America great in the first place, then the future could be dark. It could be gloomy for our young people in the future. But today, I'm an optimist. I think that, with President Trump in office, again, the economy is soaring, it's growing. There is optimism, but we do have a fight. We have an uphill battle as conservatives, and we need to keep that in our minds as we go forward.
Well, I agree, and I think one of our most challenging issues is that when people are ideologically convinced that they're right, even evidence to the contrary, like dead bodies stacked up, doesn't seem to change their mind. And so it's imperative that we start catching Americans before they're infected with this idea that socialism can work. We have to catch them before they accept that idea. Because once they've been infected with it, it seems that there's really no check or balance for it, no way to pull them out of it, except, flying plane loads of people over to Venezuela and dropping them off, with just the clothes on their back and, $5. Just let them live down there, let them eat pets and zoo animals for a while and see how socialism really works. Thank you so much for your time today. Vic Ath, former development officer at Young America's Foundation, thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, good
Pleasure
to talk
with you.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm going to share the piece on the Facebook page if you'd like to go there and read it. It's excellent. The story about his father and how he made it, that's the kind of stuff that's inspiring. And I think we should share those kinds of stories with our kids. Share them, make sure that they know, and also find out what they're doing in school. Find out what are their teachers teaching them about socialism. Ask to see their textbook. And then if you don't like what you see, the curriculum and instruction superintendent, so you probably have one of those. If your school district is set up like most school districts, you have a superintendent of curriculum and instruction. And that's the person who, with the help of a committee of parents, chooses what books, textbooks, what resources, what online websites will be utilized in your child's classroom. And you might be thinking, well, who has time for that? Who has time to try to de-indoctrinate their child who learns that socialism is the way, it's the future, it's the new thing? Our parents believe in this old thing called capitalism. The new thing really works so much better. It's better for inequality. And let me tell you something about inequality. It's always been a thing because some people are always going to be willing to work way harder than other people. And some people are always going to make better choices than other people. And so inequality exists because different people exist, because we're not all drones or robots. There's no way to eliminate what people are calling inequality except to teach people to make better decisions. That's all we can do. It's no longer about race or ethnicity, no longer about gender. It's about decisions. Like I said, you looking at your neighbor's grass, that's still grass. It's still got to be cut, and he's probably spending a lot more time cutting it, weeding it, treating it, than you might be spending on your own grass. So instead of looking at his and thinking how much better it looks, grass is grass, mow your own, take care of it, be satisfied with what you have and improve what you have. That's the root of all of this is covetousness and envy and people wanting to say, he has too much. How dare you? Do you know how many nights that person stayed up? How much time they didn't spend watching TV? How much of an opportunity they left out on for socializing and spending time, relaxing, maybe going and hanging out with friends. They spent that time studying math and science or working on a business 24 hours a day, working there and not getting much sleep for year after year after year until they finally were successful. Now you're going to say they make too much money? Based upon what? Grass is grass. We all got to mow our own plot, take care of our own selves, worry about ourselves first. Do what we need to do for ourselves first and see what kind of gains we can make. Where was I this time last year? What was I this time 5 years ago? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Ask God, which direction should I go in? In 5 years, where should I be? Oh, you'd be amazed at what God has in store for us that we're not taking advantage of because we're too busy looking at our neighbor's grass. Too busy going, oh, look what he's got. Look. Too much. We can't be those people. So I was talking about this story. When we come back in from this break, we're going to be listening to this young man talking about how he was completely, I won't say, he wasn't destroyed. His name's Brian Banks. He was wrongly accused of rape and exonerated after serving 5 years, but it was all based upon the word of one student against his. And he took the plea arrangement because he had a terrible attorney, and the attorney said, it's 40 years or you take this plea deal and you'll be out in 3 years. Instead, he ended up being sentenced to 6 years and serving 5 and losing everything he'd really set up to, worked hard for as a football student. So when we come back in from this break, you'll be hearing from Brian Banks, and he's going to be telling you how he survived that, how he got through that and was able to come to this place now where he's helping people who've been wrongly convicted and working, and also has a contract with a football team to play football. How did he go from in prison to that? You'll hear him talking about that and what concept he used to stay sane and focused right after these messages, so stay there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Lauren and I have 7 children between the ages of 2 and 26, children at all stages of development. I can tell you from experience that children are always precious, but they can be trying sometimes. Therefore, we have to create consequences for them. Consequences that are part of a system of discipline that sets up parameters and guidelines of what is and what is not acceptable behavior. Otherwise, chaos ensues. Behavior potentially worsens as they continue to defy the rules. It may be painful at the time, but it is necessary for their health and well-being. In the same way, it's no fun when the Lord disciplines you, but He's doing it for your good.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Research on religion and American life by the Barna Group shows that only 4% of professing Christians actually possess a Christian worldview. The Barna Group asked the following questions to determine whether or not a Christian worldview is present. Do absolute moral truths exist? Does the Bible define absolute truth? Did Jesus Christ live a sinful life? Is God the all-powerful and all-knowing creator of the universe, and does He still rule it today? Is salvation a gift from God that cannot be earned? Is Satan real? Does a Christian have a responsibility to share his or her faith in Christ with other people? Is the Bible accurate in all of its teachings? The correct answer to all of these questions is yes. Do you agree? If not, you do not have a Christian worldview. Instead of going through the motions, let's use our lives to honor and serve God by living out a biblically sound Christian worldview in every avenue of our lives. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
This is House Call for Health. During the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was asked how she was so sure her memories of a sexual attack are correct.
Just the level of norepinephrine and epinephrine in the brain that sort of, as you know, encodes, that neurotransmitter encodes memories into the hippocampus, and so the trauma-related experience then is kind of locked there, whereas other details kind of drift.
Psychologists say Dr. Ford's description of how the brain processes a traumatic event are essentially correct. The chemicals she mentions increase in stressful situations. She also talks about the part of the brain called the hippocampus where memories are held. But experts in how the brain works say it's not completely clear how we hang on to decades-old memories and whether it's possible those memories could change over time. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Joy Piazza, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Simply the power of choice. It's not what you go through, but how you allow it to affect you and what you choose to do moving forward. There was a period of my life where I felt, like I said, I had every negative emotion you could think of. And one day I had this epiphany that I'm not in control over the things that are taking place in my life. but I am in control of me while going through these unwanted situations. And so that was the way that I made my way out, was to know that I wanted more for me than anybody else wanted, and I knew my truth. I was going to stick to it, and it was all the power of choice. How I chose to look at things, how I chose to respond, what I chose to do moving forward. And it has me here today working with Lonnie Coombs on Final Appeal and helping people who can't help themselves.
Oh, fantastic to hear him talking like that. And if you're just tuning into the show, welcome. We're going to be taking calls in a minute. Our call lines are open at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. And the person you heard speaking was Brian Banks, a man who accepted a plea deal and went to prison on his 18th birthday. He was literally incarcerated on his 18th birthday. He was exonerated with the help of the California Innocence Project, and he went on the Megyn Kelly Today show and was joined by Project Director Justin Brooks and former prosecutor Lonnie Combs, with whom he examines the now potentially wrongful convictions on a new series that they're putting out, which is Final Appeal. And so you'll get to, if you watch that show, you'll get to see them go through the process of making the final appeal for individuals who are they have current cases that are pending. And what's so interesting about his story is that in addition to it being really just the entire conviction predicated on the word of his accuser, his word against her word, but his lawyer said, you're a big black man. When you show up in court big and black, those women on that jury are going to see that and they're going to instantly convict you. And you're going to serve 40 years in prison. So he and his mom, after hearing that, decided to take the plea deal. Meanwhile, the woman, her mom, so this is a teenage girl. He was a teenager at the time. She realized that after he had pled to this criminal conviction, that the school district could be held liable. So she went forward with a civil case, a civil suit against the school, and sued them for $1.5 million and won. During that lawsuit, others were coming in, from the school district, and they were saying, look, you got to help us defend against this because we believe you. We believe nothing happened. If we can't exonerate you, we will end up, having to pay this huge judgment, and the school shouldn't have to pay for something that never happened. Well, his lawyer was like, he's already taken the plea deal, and we don't want to put him back in jeopardy of going back for that 40 years, so forget it. So the school ended up paying them $1.5 million. Then the girl, who's now a woman, he served 5 years in prison. He's walking around with an ankle bracelet on 5 years of probation, and he's registered as a sex offender. And she reaches out to him on Facebook and says, let's put bygones behind us, and I'd really love to hang out with you and get to know you. I think we had something once upon a time. And he's like, are you out of your mind? She says, let's meet. Psychopath. So he says, he calls up the Innocence Project and he says, I've been wrongfully convicted and my accuser is now trying to date me. And they said, we don't take cases where you've already been convicted and served time. We take open cases. And he sent them a screenshot of her communications on Facebook. And the head of the Innocence Project in California said, we're going to break our rule against taking cases that have already been adjudicated, and we're going to take your case and we're going to get you exonerated. And that's exactly what they did. He set up a meeting with her she thought they were meeting at his workplace, but they were actually meeting at his lawyer's office. She shows up there and begins to just pour out her heart to him about how she was misguided. She wanted a relationship with him. He wouldn't be with her. And so she accused him. Now, they did kiss and, have a little interlude, not a sexual interlude, but kissing and all of that in a stairwell at the school. And she used that interaction to accuse him of sexual assault. And what is so amazing about the story is that she admitted all of that to him and then said, but even though that's happened, I've come out so much the better for it. We won a lot of money from the school, and I just want to be able to move forward, and I just hope you can move forward too. And she didn't recant that recantation until she realized that if it went forward and he was exonerated, because after he got that on tape, of course, she was busted out. The attorneys came in. And then later, she says, I can't do that. I take back what I said to you. I didn't mean it. Because if you lie under oath and win a huge judgment and then take it back, you have to give the money back. And she didn't want to give the $1.5 million back. But it was too late. They had her on tape. That is pretty amazing as a story. And so am I saying that there are no victims of sexual assault? Of course not. Don't play me. Don't play with my words. Am I saying that no woman ever accuses a man of sexual assault and is absolutely right and deserves to have her hearing and prosecution of that man? Absolutely not. But what I am saying is just going by someone's word isn't enough. And that's how you know this is a political ploy, because the Democrats just dismissed all allegations against Keith Ellison, and there are much more easily substantiated allegations against Keith Ellison, but they're doing that because they want to get away from him. You know, they want him to be statewide in, I think it's Minnesota, Michigan, wherever he's from, and they don't want him to not be able to serve the Democrats in elected office. So they protect their own from allegations. But with Kavanaugh, well, now he threw beer with ice in it. So, I mean, obviously he's just a monster. All right, let's go to the phones. We have Chris in Bryan, Texas. Thank you so much, Chris, for calling the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Sure.
The point I want to make was I was an economics major in college and with a political science minor. So at one semester, I had to read the Communist Manifesto for 3 separate classes. So I made a post on Facebook about the dangers. So I actually cited Dr. Dobson's article, his warning, that was on onenewsnow.com, and I just realized how few people among my peer groups share my perspective.
But why? Why did you have to read it 3 times for 3 separate classes? Why? Why was that a requirement?
There's 3 separate subjects. There's economics, philosophy, and political science. But what the dividend that came out of that was that I cited on my post that the passages in there that cite the dangers into us as Christians, where Karl Marx and Engels, they talk about overthrowing all societal traditions, mores in favor of setting up socialism. This includes the dangers of us as Christians. And also in the preface to the 1888 edition, in the words of Friedrich Engels himself, he says that at the time we wrote it, we could not call it a socialist manifesto because at the time they're citing the differences. It was the same ideas that permeated socialists and communists. The difference was the source of who was acting upon. The communists were the working class, socialists were the middle class. So because their focus was on the working class, that's the name they chose to go with. But the same ideas driving them are the same.
Wow. I just caution parents, and as a parent of a college student, it's just so much prayer that goes into, like, I thought I was praying before when she was in high school. I'm praying even harder now. Chris, thank you so much for calling. What I'm wanting to do is to encourage us as parents to don't leave that off to the wayside as something that you're going to get to. Make that praying for your student and encouraging them and talking to them, because they're under assault. Kids who've been raised right and believe in capitalism are going to school. And like he said, for 3 separate classes, he had to read the Communist Manifesto. You know, if you bathe, let's just take something simple like your little dog. If you have a little white dog like we do, he's a hair dog, he's a Maltese, and he has to be groomed every so often or gets matted. If we were to take him and constantly groom him in a solution that had a dye in it, constantly every time we took him to get him bathed at home or took him to the groomer and we bathed him in that solution, eventually whatever hair he had on his body would no longer be white. It would be whatever that solution was. And that is what's happening with our kids. They take their nice, bright, shiny, clean little brains and bathe them in communist and socialist manifestos and all kinds of really just the worst, most horrible, nonsensical, ridiculous ideas. And then we're surprised when they come out and their pristine brains are now just pockmarked and completely sullied with this garbage. You know, the Communist Manifesto is garbage. Remember, communism is atheism. And I know there are atheists who listen to and watch the show. And, you know, God love you, because the ones who reach out to me always say, well, you say such horrible things about atheism. And I want you to know I'm an atheist. And, you know, I like your show, and I know it's a Christian show, but I still like the politics and everything. And I like your moral views, and I'm moral, and I'm a communist. That's a rarity. Most communists are atheists. They believe the party is the ultimate arbiter of their fate and their demise. And communism does not permit the practice of religion freely. They may permit some practice of some approved religions, but not freely. Look at the Christians in communist China, what they're going through with their Bibles getting burned. The history is not on the side of atheism and communism being the most free cultural influences. We're so blessed to have what we have. But if you have ingratitude towards what we have, and you couple that with this idea that we could just let a little socialism in, we already have socialism, we have Medicaid. No, we don't have socialism because we have Medicaid. No, that's not what it is. We've got to be sharper than that. And as Christians, speaking to the Christians in the audience, you know what the Bible says. The Bible says no man can have two masters. You either love the one and hate the other. You can't have two. So you're going to either serve the one true God, our King. You're going to serve him, and you will see him as the ultimate Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. Or you will serve political aims, and they will fail you, they will fail you, they will fail you. And if you're in communist China, it won't just fail you. It'll take away your ability to practice your faith. It'll make you go underground with your Bible study and your Bible itself. Take down your crosses, prevent you from erecting a church in your town, and tell you all the while, if you wish to be a member of the Communist Party in good standing, then you will worship the president of the Communist Party, which is the president of China. Human rights atrocities, gulags, people being in prison, people disappearing and never coming back. You know, but I mean, by all means, let's just do a little bit of socialism and get some communism mixed in there, and let's give it a try. No. All right, let's go back to the phones. We have Kenny in Ardmore, Oklahoma. Thank you, Kenny, for calling the show today.
You're welcome, Stacy. Stacy, you're very likable and you're very intelligent.
Oh, thank you.
Earlier on, you mentioned the curriculum in the textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, or where can we find out specifically the textbooks in the elementary schools? How can we find out how common it is for there to be textbooks with the homosexual, transgender curriculum in those textbooks being taught to the little children across America? Do you know? Where can we find out? Because if we're going to sit back and turn over 85% of our 4, 5, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, well, then eventually God will just eventually turn his back on us, Stacy, and it will be a very sad day. And we appreciate your program very much. And one more thing, Christians should not go to movies where there's filthy language. We appreciate you very much, Stacy.
Amen. Amen, Kenny. You're right. We looked at the rating on that movie, and it was PG-13, and I thought, oh, it's probably not going to be that bad. It's geared towards young people, and it was that bad. It was terrible. You really have to read more reviews. It's all going downhill so quickly. Even what you thought might still be safe is no longer safe. I don't recommend that movie at all. Thank you, Kenny, so much. So here's the way that I know how it works here in the state of Missouri. So we have something called sunshine laws, which means anything that's taxpayer funded, they have to provide any communications that exist about it. So it's the emails that the teachers and the administrators have are all subject to sunshine requests. Anything that's on the school server that's paid for by taxpayers, any school books or curriculums, any online resources or texts, all have to be made available to the public upon request. So in your particular area, Kenny, and in Oklahoma, you should be able to go on the website of your school district and look and see what the sex ed curriculum is for every grade. Because here's a cake taker for you, if you might not have known this. They have sex ed starting in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And in kindergarten, it's just like, these are your body parts. Keep your hands and feet to yourself. It's very simple, but it progresses to 4th grade where they introduce the more difficult concepts. And then they begin to build upon that in middle school, and then they go full blown before the end of middle school. And then in high school, it's, it's embedded in the curriculum, meaning it's everywhere. So you're not going to find them say, here is a grade level book for each grade that has to do with sex ed. Sex ed is embedded in the curriculum, so you can't opt out of it. So go to your school district's website, and you should be able to find a list. And if you cannot, you can call over to the district's administration. And you don't have to have kids in the district. You only have to live in the district, and they're required to give you that information by phone or to email it or mail it to you at your request. And that's how you can find out what they're teaching. All right. That is the show for this hour. If you're leaving us now, God bless you from the Heartland. If you're going to stick with us, you have onenewsnow.com up next, and then we'll be right back.
Urban Family Talk.
Being there is half the battle. 1milliondads.com exists to help Christian fathers to be present and intentional in the lives of their children. Our hope is to wake up the fearsome wonder that is the mighty man of God and restore him to his role as leader, teacher, and counselor. Visit 1milliondads.com. 1milliondads.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Chuck Grassley claims he has no idea how the FBI is handling its probe of Brett Kavanaugh.
Nothing. I haven't had any conversation with the FBI, and I shouldn't have conversation with the FBI. And so we'll just have to wait for the report.
The FBI is investigating the Supreme Court nominee after 3 women came forward and accused him of sexual misconduct. Kavanaugh denies the allegations. The White House has also reportedly tried to constrain the scope of the FBI probe, limiting the subjects and witnesses that can be included. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow joined America's Newsroom to talk trade today. Kudlow told the host that new trade deals with allies will help punish China for their behavior on the global stage.
If you put all this together, new fresh trade talks with the EU and Japan, newly completed USMCA in North America, you've got pretty much now a united front amongst the major allies. I've always felt this would be a trade coalition of the willing, to send a message to China that they've got to shape up and start behaving like a citizen in the new world of trading, which they have broken time and time again.
The White House is touting its new United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, but there's still a long road ahead. It has to be approved by lawmakers in all 3 countries before it goes into effect. The death toll from Friday's disaster in Indonesia now tops 1,200, although some reports say more.
Number of people killed in the quake and tsunami that hit Indonesia Friday jumping, according to the country's disaster response agency. Hundreds more badly injured in the massive quake, which struck the island of Sulawesi, and survivors are growing desperate, like this man who told Fox sister network Sky News.
This banana is all I have left. We have no supplies at all.
One of those who died waiting for help, an air traffic controller called a hero by the pilot, who says the 21-year-old waited to make sure his plane was off safely before trying to leave his crumbling control tower. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
The Catholic Archbishop who accused Pope Francis of hiding and rehabilitating a prominent U.S. bishop accused of sexual abuse has published a second letter. Steve Jordahl reports.
In his latest public letter, former Vatican ambassador to the United States Archbishop Carlos Vigano says Pope Francis has portrayed himself and the Catholic Church as the real victims of the clergy abuse scandal and compared those that speak out against the scandal, specifically Vigano himself, with Satan, the great accuser. Catholic World News editor Phil Lawler says that's exactly what the Pope has done.
It's not much of a reach. He said that in homilies, a couple of homilies at least. And he didn't name Vigano, but it's not hard to read into what he did say, that that's who he's talking about.
Vigano also says the head of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops traveled to the Vatican to personally ask the Pope to open an investigation into abuse allegations against then-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, long suspected and later proven to be an abuser of male seminarians. The Pope apparently refused.
They went to Rome asking for an apostolic visitation, and they came back home and announced that they were carrying out their own investigation, which they wouldn't have done unless they got a no to their request.
Lawler says Vigano's second letter is an attempt to light a fire under other Vatican leadership who know the truth about the Pope refusing to investigate McCarrick. I'm Steve Jordahl.
The remnants of Tropical Storm Rosa is expected to soak the U.S. Southwest starting today. Carmen Durame just moved to Phoenix, and she's actually looking forward to it.
We need the water, I guess. To me, I actually love it when it's raining. It's cloudy. I love this weather.
Rosa was downgraded from a tropical storm to a tropical depression early today, but the threat's not over yet. The National Weather Service says it's likely to bring very heavy rain to the desert Southwest, including life-threatening flash flooding in desert areas and possible landslides in the mountains. Stocks are mixed in morning trading on Wall Street as losses for consumer-focused companies offset gains elsewhere in the market. American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I cannot specifically say that he was one of the ones who assaulted me, but before this happened to me at that party, I saw Brett Kavanaugh there.
If Avenatti's got corroborating witnesses, where are they? It's been a week, and he hasn't put a single one forward. Not a one.
And he didn't know when he was called that his client had had a restraining order on her.
Yeah.
He didn't even know.
All he said was, it's all bogus, which that's not going to cut it.
People tend to forget this. Everybody knew Trump was going to lose. Well, I'm here to say I think the odds are even money. Election night 2018 will be an even worse shock for the left than 2016 was. I don't think people want open borders. I don't think people want tolerance for fentanyl and opiate deaths. I don't think people want giant tax increases. I don't think people want to see mobs out there running around intimidating and bullying people. And I think that the Democrats are in a very, very weak position going into the last 5 weeks.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome back to the show. It's hour 2. Hey. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It is so hot here in Missouri. It's almost uncomfortable. It's not like it would be uncomfortable if it was the summer. We'd be happy for it to be in the 80s, but it's like supposed to be fall weather. It's supposed to be sweater weather. Weather for sweaters. And it's not. It's hot, like shorts weather. I wore, kind of like knee-length shorts and, this T-shirt thing today. Like this weird, totally weird. Anyway, what are we going to talk about this hour? Well, we are going to be unpacking more of the Kavanaugh news, et cetera, et cetera. And we also have this information about the fiscal year 2018 debt being up another $1 trillion. And I just want to get to Newt Gingrich, who he had a point to make that I think is really important. And I love that point because I kind of made that same point here on the show, differently but similar vein of thought. And that is, what type of America do we want to become? And listen, I'm all about everybody having their own feelings and freedom and liberty and the First Amendment, et cetera, et cetera. But when your freedoms and liberties and your thoughts start infringing on my rights and start coming over here into my little backyard and you start pushing your way into my area, that's when I'm going to have to put the brakes on and, let you know that you can just sally on forth. Do the things that only impact you. Stop trying to put your garbage in my garbage cans, right? I don't need your trash. I got enough of my own trash. And I don't want you spreading your trash all over my good stuff that I've already cleaned up. I don't want your stuff at all, to be quite honest. I have enough problems of my own that I'm working through. By the grace of God, I'm getting, we all, you know what I'm talking about. We don't have to go into detail. You know what I'm saying. We all have our own fish to fry. Stop putting your fish heads and and all that stuff over on my side. I don't need it. I have enough of my own. And that's what I see happening here is a bunch of people who have ruined their marriages, angry women, women that don't shave their armpits and their legs, women who really, they don't have two brain synapses firing together because they're emotionally compromised. They haven't read their Bibles. They've been to church and I don't know how long. They don't know how to live victoriously. Their lives are in shambles, multiple divorces, kids with everybody and their grandpa, nobody has the same dad, and all of that going on. And they're feminists and they're trying to make life work, and they're trying to make a life for a woman in America that's against women, and they're trying to battle the misogyny, and they don't know anything about joy, peace, happiness, being able to just live and enjoy what God has given to us. They can't even approach that. They're too busy being triggered, mad as all get out, constantly focusing on, well, I have a permanent tan. I know I'm oppressed. I woke up this morning feeling so oppressed, and the inequality, it's just crushing me. Yeah, you know why inequality is crushing you? Because you can't think. You're literally emotionally compromised to the point of being unable to process normal thoughts. You can't even make good decisions for yourself. And now these people, with their shambles of lives, they're completely just destroyed. Everything's just garbage. You wouldn't trade life with them. If somebody paid you $1 million, you'd be like, nope, I'll just stick here with what I got. I don't want to live as that person for even a minute, let alone a whole year or a month. No way. Those people who they're not winning in their own lives. They're not winning at life. They're not winning at work. Now they want to come tell the rest of us who are working hard and have some level of success in our lives how we're supposed to live. That men should just be quiet and do better. What about the millions of men who are doing well, who've never sexually assaulted anyone, who are raising God-fearing sons, who are literally doing everything they can to honor and protect women? What about those guys? Same thing. Well, everyone just needs to. We're not any different than animals. We need to satisfy our sexual urges because that's what animals do and that's what we do. Well, speak for yourself if that's how you want to live. But for those of us who understand that we are made in the image of God, and that the destruction of marriage and family and the traditional family unit is an attack on the Godhead, because marriage is created in the image of God, 3 persons in one. The 3 people in a marriage are God and the man and the woman. The reason why Satan wants to destroy it is because it is the vehicle by which God can operate on this earth, a godly household unit going out, those arrows, those quivers, the arrows in the quiver going out and hitting their mark because they're coming out of a godly Christian home. That's what Satan wants to destroy. And so for people who are talking about this, well, we just got this so much, liberty, and we need to be liberated. Liberate yourself from those really poorly thought out ideas and come join the rest of us over here where we're actually making a couple things happen by the grace of God. Hello. We're doing a few things over here. And your unhappiness and poorly thought out and executed life are really a hindrance to us. No wonder you're so mad. You don't know what you're doing. That's what that's all about. So you got Newt Gingrich. He says, what type of America do we want to become? It's number 1.
Look, I think it's pretty clear. If people are honest and they look at folks like Senator Booker saying you're complicit with evil if you're for Kavanaugh, they look at Senator Unruh saying men should shut up. They look at Congresswoman Maxine Waters saying hunt them down wherever they are, go into restaurants, go into gas stations, drive them off the street. You have 2 different patterns here. And the real question in the 2018 election is going to be, what kind of America do we want to become? The left, I don't care what the FBI comes up with. If the FBI comes out and says there is 0 evidence that Judge Kavanaugh did anything wrong, the Democrats will probably say, are already shifting to, well, what about drinking? What about this? What about that? I think that you have to recognize they're engaged in a search and destroy mission, as Lindsey Graham said the other day. It's deliberate. It's not an accident. It's not a game. They want power. It is, as President Lincoln warned in his Cooper Union address, they want rule or ruin. And if they have to ruin the entire system, they are prepared to ruin it. And you're living through it. And I think Republicans have got to get awake And understand, this is not some game, and it's not because Senator Schumer is confused. It is a deliberate, vicious, willful character assassination.
And if you're okay with it happening to Judge Kavanaugh, then you must be okay with it happening to your son. And please miss me with that whole Bill Cosby. Just stop. Just stop. Okay? So here he comes back, Newt Gingrich. And it was a pretty long interview, actually, but he's so good at doing those. And by the way, if you know any of Newt Gingrich's staff, or if you know Mr. Gingrich himself, former Speaker Gingrich, we want to have him on the show. I'm not making intentionally a pouty face, but I'm feeling a little miffed. Speaker Gingrich, please join us on the show. We'd love to talk to you. So here he is. He's talking about Republicans need to come out very clearly. And I appreciate this message coming from him because I know actual Republicans in charge are, hopefully listening to him. He's a national figure of importance. He makes a great point here in number 2.
I think it's very straightforward. The 2018 election is about which America do we want to become. Do we want to be an America where people rush into your restaurant, invade your personal space? Do we want to be an America where people can be smeared and destroyed on totally unsubstantiated behavior? Do we want to be an America in which the government is used as a weapon to make you change your life? That's where the left is. So you can have a choice, and you see this morning, by the way, in the great news about the deal with Mexico and Canada. You have a results-oriented team led by Trump, and you have a resistance-oriented team led by Pelosi and Schumer. And Republicans ought to draw this line very clearly. They ought to say, for example, we're trying to protect our children from fentanyl and opioid deaths. The Democrats don't care about it. They're willing to have a totally open border, even if that means more fentanyl and more opioid deaths. We have to be as blunt and as emotional and as direct as our Democratic opponents, or they're frankly going to run over us.
And when we talk about lawlessness, that this is what we're talking about here, that one party is advocating for the abdication of the rule of law, not just at the border anymore. Now we see that it's no longer okay to say, well, I'm innocent until proven guilty. So bring your proof. And I'm going to get my attorney to bring the proof that I'm innocent. That's not good enough anymore. Now it's, well, women have to be believed if they're Democrats and you're a Republican. So, it's like, do they not see that we can see through that? I know there are millions of people out there who can't. Good, sweet people who honestly believe that just because a woman says something happened to her, we have to believe her if the person she's accusing is a Republican. They actually believe that. They don't care if it doesn't make any sense. They don't care if it could happen to their husband, father, brother, or son. They just care about winning this one time. You ever heard someone, I just need to do this one time? That's the devil, and he is a liar. You do it the one time, then next time you'll need to do it again. And you'll need to keep doing it. And you'll need to keep doing it. That's how you get trapped. Just need to do it this one time. It won't matter if I do it just this once. Don't be deceived. That's what this is about. So I found this other piece of McConnell, Leader McConnell. He was in rare form again on the floor of the Senate, talking about the Democrats moving the goalposts, saying their goalposts keep shifting, but their goal, the actual goal, hasn't moved an inch. It's number 6.
The confirmation process for Judge Brett Kavanaugh, one of the most qualified and most impressive Supreme Court nominees in our nation's history, is moving forward. On Friday, the Judiciary Committee reported this nomination favorably. Then here on the floor, we officially moved to take up the nomination. Every Republican member of the committee agreed that Judge Kavanaugh should be reported out with a favorable recommendation, and every Democrat voted in opposition. Their goalposts keep shifting, but their goal hadn't moved an inch, not an inch. The goal's been the same all along. And so let me make it very clear. The time for endless delay and obstruction has come to a close. Judge Kavanaugh's nomination is out of committee. We're considering it here on the floor. And, Mr. President, we'll be voting this week.
And again, so he might have thrown a beer on somebody in college. What else you got? Just put it to a vote, up or down. I know there's a certain level of energy that is going on with this thing, that it's on both sides of the political aisle. But I just encourage you to truly just, first of all, devote yourself to making sure that you got that prayer time every day, that you're asking God for his guidance on what you should do. Because it's in all areas of our life, which means it also includes how we vote. And you're going to maybe not be so excited about what God has to say. I remember a time in my life where I just knew I was right politically and that everything that I was doing was perfectly in line with what a Christian should do. And then God showed me otherwise. And you got to be open to that correction. And also to speak the truth in love. We've got to be cognizant of the fact that we're trying to get along with each other. Saying that for myself as much as I am for you. It's hard, but we've got to make that effort to do that. When we get back, we're going to be talking about the scope of the FBI investigation into Kavanaugh, and we'll take some calls as well. Stay right there. Stacey on the Right. Call lines are open also, 866-963-2037. Be right back.
Meet Roxy, nurse director for the preborn clinic in Southern California.
I have this lady, and she came in. She was very scared. Boyfriend didn't want her to have a baby, and she said, I don't want this baby. We provided an ultrasound. She was laying on a table, and there it was. It was a small baby. Then she heard the heartbeat. She heard the heartbeat, and she said, what? It's alive. After hearing the heartbeat, she made a decision that she was going to keep her baby. She also made a decision that day to recommit herself to Jesus.
Preborn runs and leads Christian pregnancy centers all over the country, helping abortion-minded mothers to choose life for their unborn babies. To find out more about how you can help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Every time a major hurricane hits the American coastline, we are sure to hear more claims that the devastation is due to global warming. Reporters and politicians argue that the Earth's changing climate is fueling these supercharged storms and destroying our coastal areas. Fortunately, Dr. Roy Spencer is providing some perspective to the hyperbole and fear-mongering that surface with each tropical storm or hurricane. If you look at two graphs he's put together, you can see how hurricane damage has increased, even though storm intensity has slightly decreased. Let me take the second point first. He shows that hurricane intensity since the 1930s and 1940s has decreased. The correlation line trends slightly downward, even though we've had some significantly intense storms from time to time. And it's worth mentioning that until 2017, the United States went 11 years without a major hurricane strike. But you may be thinking that is fine, but what about the devastating hurricanes like Katrina, Sandy, and Harvey? When measured in terms of billions of dollars of damage, those were obviously severe, but also significant outliers. The cost was huge for two reasons: increased population and an increase in the amount of valuable and vulnerable infrastructure in coastal areas. When Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina, few in the media reminded us that the last major hurricane to hit North Carolina was Hurricane Fran in 1996. That was 22 years ago. None of this is meant to minimize the devastating impact that hurricanes can have on coastal areas. We need to do all we can to protect people before a hurricane hits and immediately provide assistance to victims after a hurricane passes. But let's stop blaming climate change for these hurricanes. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I think I'm satisfied. We don't know all the details yet, but clearly if they have been given free rein to interview whomever they want, then that's a very good sign. The last thing we want is a sham investigation. I also think that there's a fairly small universe of witnesses here and a very big FBI. So yes, I think they probably should be able to get this done by Friday if they really put the effort into it.
Yes. Well, that's what's happening. The investigation is moving on. They're also investigating Dianne Feinstein in her office and whether or not they leaked the information that was supposed to be kept confidential on behalf of Christine Blasey Ford. Oh, they're investigating a lot of different things. And it's as it should be. If we're going to have the FBI step in and do some investigating, they might as well investigate the circumstances surrounding everything that we've seen, because this circus has got to, it's a ride that has to be stopped. People want off, and while they're actually exiting the ride, we should be made aware of exactly how this all started. What were the processes that went on? What were the communications? Why? Why was it made in this way? In such a way that it completely it goes against everything we've said we believe in, that we want to happen in a confirmation process. And I'd be saying that if it was on the Republican side as well. If Republicans were bringing up allegations at the last minute and dragging out the process, I wouldn't be on board with that. There have to be standards. There have to be. There's just no, it's not okay for there to be no standards. So let's talk about this debt. We've got, in fiscal year 2018, debt is up by well over $1 trillion. The feds borrowed $8,172 for every American who had a job. I mean, it's just so shameful. So shameful. Now, we started the year with $20 trillion in debt, and we ended the year with $21 trillion in debt. So it's the 8th fiscal year in the last 11 in which the debt increased by at least $1 trillion in a fiscal year. The United States saw its greatest fiscal year increase in the federal debt in fiscal year 2009. That year, the debt increased by almost $2 trillion. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that there are 155,542,000 workers in the United States as people with jobs, which means that well over $21 trillion in debt equaled approximately $138,330 for every person in the country who works. Now, I don't know about you, but $138,000, that's not a number I can pay. That's not a number I want to put on installments like a mortgage. I'm not interested in paying that. No way, no how. I'm not only not interested in paying it, I wish there was a way that we could figure out who was directly responsible for this debt and apportion it out to those people, because I bet you anything, they would cut their budgets and they'd reduce things down. They would make the changes occur so that they wouldn't be responsible for that debt. Isn't that how it works? Have you ever just been sitting in your living room or having lunch with a friend out someplace and someone walked up to you and said, I just borrowed $60,000 and I don't want to pay it back, and then handed you the bill and said it's now your responsibility and walked away? That is what our elected officials have been doing. When we say cut, we had the Tea Party movement, which everybody said was about racism, which was very convenient. Call it racism, and then nobody has to ask, well, why do they want to reduce taxes? Why do they want to reduce the size of government? Why? Well, if people had asked that and listened for 5 seconds, they would have heard that, first of all, Planned Parenthood doesn't need any of our money. USAID dollars, all of it should be dried up. Yes, I said all of it. All of it. I believe Rand Paul is right on that. We can't help our allies by borrowing to give them money. Let them borrow their own money if they need it. We shouldn't borrow it to give to them. We have every Tom, Dick, and Jenny with their hands stuck out, and we're just putting money in it like we have all the money in the world. And I know that one of the things that we've seen with President Trump is he's gone around and he's made it like the UN. He's been putting the smack down there saying, you guys need to up your funding. You need to share the load. He's gone around to our trade deals, our trade partners, and said, we can't have this transfer of wealth, because that's what it is. And we have these huge deficits with these other nations. It's a transfer of wealth. President Trump has said no more. Now, because people don't like President Trump, they feel it's okay to, well, I just don't agree with that. So you're telling me that if you didn't like me, but I knew the secret to eliminating all of your debt within 3 years, let's say, including your mortgage, you wouldn't take that information from me because you don't like me? That's the equivalent of saying we don't want Donald Trump to renegotiate our trade deals because we don't like him. I didn't like Barack Obama. I didn't hate him, but I didn't like him. But if he had been doing things that were good for us on the foreign policy front, I would have happily golf clapped that and said, look, that's good stuff right there. I thought the mentorship programs he set up for young adults in going from high school to college, and he set those up with professionals, and those were things that were sponsored by the White House. It's like the Faith and so-and-so office at the White House, and he started those programs through there. And when I found out about them, I talked about them on the radio, and I said they were good. If there was something good that he did, I definitely appreciated it because, he was the president. It would have been better for me and for Americans in general had he been better at that job. So same token with President Trump. I can't help but be excited to hear that he's going to stop the transfer of wealth from Americans to foreign individuals by stopping them from stealing our intellectual property and stopping them from having huge amounts of their products dumped on our market for cheap while they won't sell any of our stuff in their country. That's how China is. So, just back up off of the Trump derangement Kool-Aid for 5 seconds and admit that a booming economy in which everyone is employed, everyone who wants a job has a job, is such a better situation than stagflation, stagnated growth on our GDP, huge trade deficits, and an overall malaise that impacts other nations, which allows the growth of terrorist groups like ISIS. The other reason why ISIS has been crushed under our feet, well, you heard it yesterday from Eric Trump, because Donald Trump said, I don't know much about the military except that I think you guys are wicked awesome, but I'm not going to, argue with you about whether or not you should use the mother of all bombs or if you should use, 20 Patriot missiles. I'm not exactly up to speed on that as well. I probably shouldn't be, never served the military. So what I think you should do is, under the advisement of those who are experts at making war, you should make war in a way that helps us to win. So go do what you do best. And look what's happened. They've completely crushed ISIS. None of this fighter pilots calling in to the Situation Room at the White House to find out if it's okay if they release their payload. Do you know that was going on during the Obama administration? Pilots who, by any definition of the word, are geniuses. They have a fast, twitchy reflex muscle that it must be present in order for you to be a pilot. So it's something that every person doesn't have this. It's a special, a gifting, if you will, that they have, which means they're able to respond to stimuli faster than regular people. Not that we aren't fast or we ain't cool, whatever, but they have this special thing. And so that, coupled with high intellect and them making the proper choices in high school and college, lines them up to be fighter pilots. So they have the natural gifting, they have the educational background, they have the training from the U.S. military, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Navy, etc. And then they go out and they know the rules of engagement, all of the different reasons why they would or wouldn't do a mission in a certain way. And so their commander is telling them to go out and do X. But under the Obama administration, instead of them just being able to fly that sortie, drop their payload if they felt so inclined, and come back to report on what they did, they'd have to actually be in the air, flying, quite a bit faster than your average jet that takes you to and from, New York to Miami, let's say. They'd have to actually have it radioed in, report the conditions that they saw, and then have someone in the Situation Room at the White House say, yeah, this isn't a good one for us. Just come back. Burning up JP-8 and just, whatever. It's okay. We got the money. We just burn up jet fuel and waste our pilots' time and increase their level of frustration because they're out there to do a job, but they can't do it because some suit wearer in the White House thinks it's not a good day to drop missiles on the enemy. That's the kind of tomfoolery that we had to put up with our military under the previous administration. Now contrast that with what's going on now. It's what are your rules of engagement? Who is in the chain of command who can give the authority, the actual go-ahead to fly that sortie and carry out this mission? Go. The president gets the reports later. And then if there are security briefings that need to be had based on intel and et cetera that has been gathered on these missions, then the president is briefed on that. And if changes or conversations need to be had, those are had. But actual operational conditions and the expertise of those who are in command over those fighter pilots are the ones who make the decisions about what they're going to do to make war. The difference in those two scenarios cannot be overstated. In one scenario, you have a U.S. military, which is the finest operational military force on the face of this planet. The only one that compares is Israel's military. And you have these experts. They're not just experts because they've been to war college. They've been on the ground. They've fought wars. They've fought with their hands war. They've killed enemies and come home to talk about it. Those individuals are the ones who should make the decisions about actions that are taken in theater, not pencil pushers back in D.C. Yes, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military, but it doesn't mean he gets to decide what side your hat is going to be removed from your head when you go into the chow facility and who's going to fly what missions and et cetera like that. That is not the purview of the executive in chief. But that's what we had going on. And that's just one example. And so this isn't about loving Donald Trump or liking him. It's about acknowledging when someone is able to accomplish a feat like crushing ISIS and acknowledging that that's good for us. It's good for Americans. It reduces terrorism. It saves lives in the Middle East. It keeps our troops and soldiers safe. They're not being kidnapped and ransomed and beheaded. And that's just one example of where President Trump is doing a good job. And so this isn't about feelings. It's not about permanent tan, no permanent tan. It's not about ethnicity or inequality. It's about who does a better job. And we've all been there. We've all worked with someone who, they're just not the people person that we wish they would be. They're not going to be the one that we call up in the evening and say, I'm watching Poldark. Do you want to come over? It's not that person. But that person has the expertise and does a fantastic job at what they do at work. And you're thinking, I'd rather not have anyone else do that job. And sometimes that's the situation. I haven't found that often for myself. Most of the time, the people that I work with, I've been like, hey, I like my coworkers. But if you do encounter a person like that who's really good at what they do, is it more important for you to like them or to get rid of that person and find someone that you like, someone who looks good in a suit, someone who's, like your favorite orator, someone who's cool on the late night TV shows? Or is it more important to have someone there who actually knows what they're doing? I don't need a friend in the White House. I need someone who actually knows what they're doing. Because the decisions that the commander-in-chief makes, these things impact all of us. And so it doesn't matter who goes on what late night shows, because that's nothing. What matters is that the person can do a good job and that they want to do a good job, that they want to be effective more than they want to be liked, or, that more than they want to be friends with the rest of us. So over the break, remember first hour, I talked about Night School, the movie that we went to go see that I found so disappointing. And I think it's our call screener who pointed out to me that there's a website that you can go to before you head out to the theater so that you're not kind of blindsided, because I just looked at the rating and the actors who were in the film and thought, okay, this is probably going to be pretty good. The website is called movieguide.org. And on there, you just type the name of the movie into the search bar, and it will, pull it up for you. And they also have an app called Family Night that you can put up in on your phone, where you can find movies for, a movie a week that you want to watch with your family. So I'm going to try that later. But the rating on Night School, it says hit and miss comedy with a heart, language heavy, violence light, sex light, nudity moderate, quality 3 stars out of 4, content -2, extreme caution, which would have prompted us not to go. It says the audience is older teenagers and adults. Runtime 111 minutes. And in here, they actually have a summary of the movie and then a review, which can give you some spoilers, but it's probably pretty good for parents, especially if you're prepping for, your kids are like, we want to go see this as a group. Teens do that a lot. They'll get together, go eat a little something, and then go to the movies. And you can then decide if you feel it's something that's appropriate for them. And I got to say, it's one of those things where your kids are eventually going to be out on their own. They're going to be watching whatever they want, but you want to guide them while they're still in the home. And when you have, a miss like this movie was for us, it's a teachable moment. But in the end, we still want to, we want to prevent them from consuming this kind of content. So it's movieguide.org. And thanks so much to our call screener on Stacey on the Right Show for sharing that with us. All right, when we get back, we'll be listening to even Wolf Blitzer from CNN calling out Dianne Feinstein. Stay there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Lauren and I have 7 children between the ages of 2 and 26, children at all stages of development. I can tell you from experience that children are always precious, but they can be trying sometimes. Therefore, we have to create consequences for them. Consequences that are part of a system of discipline that sets up parameters and guidelines of what is and what is not acceptable behavior. Otherwise, chaos ensues. Behavior potentially worsens as they continue to defy the rules. It may be painful at the time, but it is necessary for their health and well-being. In the same way, it's no fun when the Lord disciplines you, but He's doing it for your good.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
This week during our family worship time together, when we turned to the scripture, I was sharing with my family, and we were discussing the scripture that says, do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. And I was explaining the whole caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly process. My son said, he's 6 years old, Daddy, I get it. We're like the caterpillars. God provides the cocoon, and God's desire all along is, even though we're in caterpillar form, is for us to become butterflies. And then look what he said. But you know when we get into trouble, Daddy? When we try to move from caterpillar to butterfly, and we skip over God. And when you try to skip over God, you think you have your wings, but you fall flat.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
And I had to tell you, I had to fight back tears in the moment, because I'm saying, oh, Lord, he's getting this.
From America's election headquarters.
Missouri Republican Senate candidate Josh Hawley made it to the national spotlight last week when he appeared at a President Trump rally in Springfield, Missouri.
Let's make America great again. Thank you so much. God bless you.
And speaking of God, religion has become something of an issue in this Senate race. Hawley, the state's attorney general, favors the repeal of a federal amendment that outlaws political endorsements by religious organizations. It's known as the Johnson Amendment. A church could lose its tax-exempt status if it makes an endorsement. And Hawley says the Johnson Amendment punishes churches and their pastors. Hawley is locked in a tight race with the incumbent Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. She's in favor of keeping the Johnson Amendment. Hawley will speak this week at a chapel service at a Baptist university in Hannibal, Missouri. If an endorsement from the pulpit comes, it could spark a legal challenge of the Johnson Amendment. Anna Eliopoulos, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader, the minority leader in the Senate, he wants the FBI formally brief the Senate, all the members, before there's a final vote on the Senate floor. Do you support that, or would a document, a written report from the FBI based on all their questions and answers, all their background check information, would that be adequate?
Well, if the normal procedure would have been for all of this to have been done, including the FBI report completed before the initial hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, well, that's not being done. In fact, the Judiciary Committee has already voted this out. So I think Senator Schumer is absolutely right to say that the relevant body now is the United States Senate itself, and they should be fully briefed on the FBI.
Well, there would have been a formal investigation if the ranking Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, Dianne Feinstein, would have alerted the FBI in confidence about this problem, but she kept it quiet.
Yeah, so that's Wolf Blitzer actually doing the job of a journalist by making the point that had the Democrats followed proper procedure, not only would this have been completely investigated, but they would have had the ability to question Dr. Ford and keep her confidential. So if they found it credible, so be it. If they found it not credible, so be it. It would not have been an issue for her and her family. And it also would have saved the Kavanaugh family from the just relentless media assault that they've been under. It's just, I mean, there's no way to describe how absolutely uncouth and ridiculous this whole scenario has been. There are procedures in place to make sure that it doesn't have to be this way, but those procedures were eschewed in favor of a political win. It's disgusting. So that was Wolf Blitzer calling out Dianne Feinstein. And then you have Megyn Kelly questioning the credibility of the Avenatti-backed accuser. And I thought this piece was really good because she brings up some points that, well, you know, she's a lawyer. So, and she wasn't like out in, you know, very rural areas doing legal work. She was doing legal work as a prosecutor in a major metropolitan area. And so she's still very sharp in this topic area. So it's number 4.
This is the one who claims
I'm not sure she wants to be.
Was the victim of an alleged gang rape that Kavanaugh did not participate in. But she says she allegedly claims he was at a party where one happened, and it's emerged from various reporting this weekend. She faced allegations of her own misconduct during a stint at a Portland company 18 years ago. That company claims she told them she graduated from Johns Hopkins, but they learned the school had no record of her. She also falsely described her work experience at a prior employer. They said she engaged in unwelcome sexually offensive conduct herself. They said she made false and retaliatory allegations against her coworkers, that they had been inappropriate with her. They said she took medical leave and simultaneously claimed unemployment benefits. At the same time in D.C., there was a restraining order filed against her by an ex-boyfriend who claims she harassed him, his wife, and their baby. I could go on. So the people who are very upset that the FBI is not looking into Julie Swetnick's allegations, there are reasons for that.
So while we're sitting here having the show and listening to that, there's this second round of a political hit job. They call it a treasure trove of documents that they've gotten, personal documents, family documents from the Trump family, from Fred Trump, who, they've gotten these documents. Who knows how they got them? And they're now releasing them. And people are tweeting about it and saying that there's this fraud and there's that fraud. If there was some kind of fraud, would not the IRS have already investigated it? This is a total election ploy. This is meant to drag down the president's credibility leading up to the election. And let me just say, if it was, Hillary Clinton who'd done some things wrong with taxes or any impropriety at all, the Democrats would say, well, that's in the past. That's not something that's relevant right now. So you know what I'm going to say, don't you? It's irrelevant. I don't care what they found. Irrelevant. Now, obviously, if there were some lives lost or, some allegations like that, that would be different. But anything that the Clintons have obviously been guilty of, they've been given a pass by the Democrats, that same pass extends out magically like a beautiful cape like a superhero cape made of tinsel with a tad bit of like a splash of polyester and fine cotton. It's a mix. It's a mixed fabric. And it may be dry clean only. We don't know. But it's a cape of okayness. You could call it the okay cape, or the cape of irrelevance, really. The cape of irrelevance. Let's call it the cape of irrelevance. And that cape billows out ever so gently and appropriately with a touch of panache. It billows out behind Hillary Clinton, whether she's wearing a house dress or a $12,000 suit, and it covers all of the transgressions of the past. It can also whip to the front like a magic cape and cover transgressions that she might do in the future, but for most of its usage is for the past. And that cape is liberally called upon and fluffed up and sometimes ironed on the corners and the edges and spot cleaned by anyone who proclaims the mantle of being a Democrat. Anything you could say about Hillary Clinton and now Barack Obama, he's not the president anymore. Well, that's not a scandal. He never had any scandals. He never did anything wrong. Hillary Clinton, she was supposed to be the first woman president, and she's not responsible for her husband's behavior. Well, let's apply those same, colloquialisms to Donald Trump and his cape, because his cape is just like Hillary Clinton's and it stretches back just as far. And it sounds like this. That's not Donald Trump's fault. He was in business with his father and other family members. That's in the past. See how the cape billows out behind him? Can you see it? Visualize it with me. That same cape of irrelevance just covers all of the things in the past, because those things aren't relevant right now because he is the president now, and we just only have to do with what started on November 8th of 2016, or more appropriately, actually, the presidency didn't begin until January 20th of 2017. So that's the part that's in front of him. That's the part that's appropriate to discuss. And everything from before, whether it's tax returns or anything else like that, it goes under the cape of irrelevance and just, I don't know what you're talking about. And not only do I not know, I don't care. So if you think that you can address what you call a beam in Donald Trump's eye without first, or a speck or a mote or whatever you think he's got going on, without first looking at the two 18-wheeler truck-sized obstructions that are currently attached to your face, I point you to the cloak of irrelevance. Not only is it irrelevant, but it will not change anything in November. If you think these new releases will have any kind of ameliorating effect on voters who have looked at this attempt to, really just pillory Judge Kavanaugh, it's still too fresh, and it will remain fresh. It's one thing to say, you're in the political arena and, you got to give as good as you get, and, you square up, put your dukes up, that whole thing. It's another thing to say, oh, and your wife and your kids are also, they need to square up too. No. I would never be okay with it when it was the Obama's daughters. I wasn't okay with it when it was Chelsea Clinton. She's a grown woman now. She's fair game now because she's in politics. She tweets. She does all that stuff. But when she was a little girl, oh, no. The Bush daughters, no. It's never okay to make the kids the issue, to attack the kids, because the kids don't have a choice in what their parents do for a living. And also their kids, hello. So I'm whatever you think it is he did, whatever, he made a lot of money, whoop-de-doo. So did the Clintons. Whatever you think it might be, there's a cloak for it. It's covered up, and I don't care. So speaking of freedom of religion, in China, Christian school children are forced to tick the no religion box. This goes back to this idea that socialism might be okay for a little bit. Just a little teensy little bit of it, like saying, let's have a little bit of poison in our cereal this morning. A little bit won't hurt. A little poison. Don't worry. It's just a little bit. More than 300 Christian children in 2 high schools. Again, high schoolers. So these are kids who definitely know they're Christians. They're not small kids. High schools in Zhejiang province which has been referred to as the Jerusalem of the East for its strong Christian presence, these 300 kids have been asked to fill out a form stating they don't follow a religion. While it's normal for a school to ask parents to fill out a form which includes questions of faith when a child is first enrolled in school, for many years this hasn't been an issue. Schools in China are government-controlled and financed and therefore teach communism. The Christian children have sometimes faced shaming incidents, but the extent of the shaming was to prevent them from joining Communist Youth League, thereby denying them any of the perks that come with a progression to Communist Party membership later in life. In this case, however, the children were handed a questionnaire for class about faith. That's not normal. This seems to be a part of the new push to identify Christians and pressure them in one way or another. Children in this part of China could write Christian, one, because of their innocence, and two, because they came from families of fervent believers who did not compromise their faith. In the first school, which has about 200 Christian students, the teacher demanded they rewrite the questionnaire stating that they had no religion. But when filling out the next questionnaire, half of the children maintained that they were Christians. So in the end, after being warned again and again and again, all but one child complied and put no religion. In the other school, which has about 100 kids, it was the class prefect who forced the Christians to resubmit their papers stating they had no religion. Now, the goal here is to limit the growth of Christianity, which I don't know if anybody's noticed or not, but the way to limit Christianity is through cultural abrogation. You know, you infect the culture. Limiting it by telling people they can't be Christians has the opposite effect. But I mean, don't anybody tell the Chinese that. So the source for this story told the worldwatchmonitor.org that children in China are pressured in a variety of ways. In these cases, it would be using words only. It seems teachers recently were tasked with pressuring children by separating them from other students to counsel or talk to them sternly about the consequences about talking about being a Christian believer at school, urging them to write no religion on their questionnaire. This is for the child's sake and to limit any growth of Christianity amongst young people through evangelism or as simply becoming known as the ones who could answer questions other pupils may have about Christianity. So kids who aren't Christians might have questions about why the other kids are Christians. So to prevent them from asking their classmates, so what is it about Christianity, or why are you a Christian? They want all of the kids to say they have no religion. That way, the ones who really do have no religion won't know who to ask if they're interested in getting some. Isn't that insidious? So the children who do not comply are reportedly denied access to opportunities at school, such as being elected as class representatives for special events. They could also potentially face the danger of not receiving a leaving certificate from their school, which enables them to attend university. Such incidents are also recorded in the child's personal file, which is held by local government departments, and the information can hamper their future employment. Of course, all of these are hypothetical scenarios and would be determined largely by the level of involvement of the individual school, its teachers and principals. But generally, the sense is they're biased against Christians. The parents also feel a lot of worry and anxiety for their children's prospects, and they worry that the kids will leave the faith because they don't want to be left behind and not have opportunities, not be able to go to college. So other stories that are connected to this are in China, Christian summer camps have been closed down and the priests who run them have been dismissed. Children were stopped from entering a church as pressure on Henan's Christians has been increased. And the head of religious affairs, a communist section of the communist government, warns of domination by foreign forces because that's what they worry about, that Americans and other Christians around the world will achieve dominance somehow in Chinese culture through Christianity, because they know it's the thing about America that's so different from China. They want the benefits of Christianity, but they don't want the Christianity itself because their God is communism. And they can't have two competing factions there because Christianity will win out hands down over communism. I mean, communism is totalitarianism, and its ownership of your government owns you. You're a slave to the state. Anyone would want to be freed from that. So it's very sad. Very, very sad that they're having to go through this. And I told you about them removing the expressions of faith, the crosses that were hanging on Christians' homes. Imagine living in a country where you put a cross on your home and the government told you to take it off. You know, here in America, it would be your homeowners association would tell you that the cross is not one of the approved symbols or colors that are permitted on the outside of your residence by the homeowners association. In China, it's the government. To God be the glory. We know the end of this story. I'm excited about the end of this week, and we're moving there. Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow will be Wednesday. I'll be back with you with more Stacy on the Ride here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And our guest is Carol Clemens, I think. So be with you then. God bless, and good night from the Heartland.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban